Time now to look at what's making headlines in the papers and in the online sites with the BBC's Stuart Hughes and Dr. Mohammed Qasim, a visiting fellow at Swansea University. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Mohammed, would you like to kick off?
Yes, certainly. The Sunday Telegraph headlines a story: Tony Blair accused of breaking quarantine rules with a trip to the US. The former Prime Minister was pictured at Mayfair restaurant, allegedly 10 days after a visit to the White House. And despite sources saying that he did not have exemption. And David Jones, who's a Conservative member, said that it sets an appalling example to travellers if a former Prime Minister appears to flout the rules in such a flagrant manner. So one source said that Mr. Blair was like a rock star at the event, with people lining up for photos with him, which makes it all the more necessary for him to have quarantined for 14 days on his return. But I guess this is a story again highlighting how Mr. Tony Blair can get away with situations when others won't. And this was the case with the war in Iraq, the Chilcot report set out a load of allegations against the Prime Minister that he was lying at the time. So I think here, again, we've got a situation with an ex-Prime Minister who seems to be breaking rules.
And Stuart, you've picked up on that story as well.
Yes, and sort of the question I would ask is, does it matter? Of course, in some ways it does. Tony Blair is a public figure and a former Prime Minister. You may think he should be set an example by following the rules over COVID-19 to the letter. But the Sunday Telegraph does note that Mr. Blair is considered a private citizen, which may force some readers to ask whether the activities of a private citizen, even if he is a former Prime Minister, are worthy of splashing on the front page of a national newspaper. And I think some people will be asking this morning, could it be an attempted dirty tricks campaign by the usually Conservative supporting Sunday Telegraph to suggest that Labour can't be trusted in a week after a week in which the current Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer's won a few political battles in the eyes of some over Boris Johnson, over his handling of the pandemic? So is it a dirty tricks campaign, or should we be interested in what Tony Blair's got up to and whether he followed quarantine rules? It's just one for the reader to decide.
I don't know, Stuart. I mean, you know, when you think of the whole Dominic Cummings business and the whole attention that got, I mean, you know, Dominic Cummings, okay, he's currently an advisor in the present government, but you know, isn't it fair game for anyone who's a public figure who breaks rules for them to be exposed?
I think it probably is, given that he is a Prime Minister and was a Prime Minister for so many years, and I think it's entirely deliberate and quite noticeable in the opening paragraph of the Sunday Telegraph story that they note that Tony Blair was not only possibly flouting COVID-19 quarantine restrictions, but also travelling on private jets. It's mentioned in the opening paragraph of the Sunday Telegraph, perhaps a little nudge, wink, wink about Mr. Blair's supposed jet-setting lifestyle since he left Downing Street.
What else have you seen, Mohammed?
This is an article in The Guardian where the police are really struggling with the amount of 999 calls to people suffering with mental health crisis. The police are being called out to deal with soaring numbers of incidents involving people suffering with mental health crisis, sparking fresh concern about the lack of NHS help for the mentally ill. And what's interesting is that the number has risen by 41% over the past 5 years. And this also presents with another issue where are the police simply overstretched? Under the Mental Health Act, the police are called to help deal with the situation because someone who presents with a mental health emergency may also pose a risk to themselves or others. So the police are that point of contact, but it seems that the numbers are soaring, the NHS is struggling, and even the police are telling us that they too are finding this difficult.
Thank you. Stuart, what else have you seen?
There's a detailed and rather disturbing story on the front page of the Sunday Times. It says a British woman who alleges she was the victim of a serious sexual assault by a senior royal family in the United Arab Emirates has been interviewed by Scotland Yard. Sunday Times says Caitlin McNamara claims she was attacked by the Minister of Tolerance in the United Arab Emirates cabinet and a member of Abu Dhabi's royal family, and Miss McNamara has chosen to waive her anonymity to tell her story. The sheikh involved denies any wrongdoing and says he's surprised and saddened by the claims. Miss McNamara was working for the Hay Literary Festival when the alleged attack took place, and the festival's directors have pledged never to return to the Gulf Kingdom again while the man at the centre of the allegations remains in his post. The Hay Festival describing the alleged assault as an appalling violation and a hideous abuse of trust and position. The Sunday Times outlines the allegations in significant detail, obviously, because there are legal ramifications as well. It does go quite deeply into that story. But I think they're given added significance in the context of the recent establishment of full diplomatic ties, particularly between the United Arab Emirates and Israel, which is seen as a rare foreign policy success by Donald Trump's administration as the UAE moves slowly towards the West. The Sunday Times says the Sheikh casts himself as a progressive figure, one who's willing to make overtures to the West, but he's at the centre of very serious allegations this morning in the Sunday Times, although ones he strenuously denies.
What else have you seen, Mohammed?
Wales Online, an unusual battle rages in tourist town, driven by the arrival of an asylum seeker camp. And this story's probably been going on for a few weeks now, where every weekend, come rain or shine, protesters pitch up outside the gates of the camp near Tenby. And there's almost a weekly race between two factions, one for and one against, to claim the space outside the main gates. And the Wales Online described a lady who travels all the way with her husband, all the way from Newcastle Emlyn, some 40 miles away, and she's in her 70s, and she makes this journey during quarantine, and she opposes these young men being there. And one of the justifications for being there weekly, pretty much, is we've come down to support those against. They are 18 to 35-year-olds, and there's a risk to our young girls. So this is a story that's probably likely to continue until some sort of solution. I think it's a difficult one to kind of report on, because on the one hand you've got an area which is known for its tourism, and it suddenly has an arrival of a large number of young people. So there's concerns amongst residents, but then on the other we have a responsibility in one sense to take in asylum seekers. So yes, a difficult one to comment on.
Stuart, I think we have time for one more story.
One more after the slanket and the onesie. The Observer warns its readers, prepare to be fleeced again. It says, every autumn a piece of novelty clothing appears covering the wearer from head to toe. This year, it's the Oodie, which resembles a blanket with a hood, and it's often covered in doodles of unicorns, cartoon avocados and pizzas, and demand for the Oodie is so high that one company can't fulfill its orders until the end of the year. After the year we've had, perhaps not surprising that people are searching for an item that wraps them up like a baby, especially when we're all spending so much time at home. It's not about cool, it's about comfort, says a retail analyst. I must admit, I haven't tried an Oodie yet, but after seeing pictures of them and reading about them in the Observer, they're going straight on my Christmas list this morning.
Oh, well, it's the unicorns and the pizzas that sold me on those. Stuart, Mohammed, thank you both very much indeed for reviewing the papers and the news websites for us this morning. Now, you can listen again to this programme on the BBC Sounds app for music, radio and podcasts. And if you want advance notice of our guests and subjects, follow at Wales Politics on Twitter. There's more Welsh Politics with Politics Wales on BBC One this morning. But this has been Sunday Supplement. After the news is All Things Considered. Bore da chi.